Kicking off at number 5, A Lonely Place to Die, 2011.
Huh?
2011 wasn't the greatest year for cinema, particularly when it came to horror, but strangely enough, this little gem of a high-octane mountaineering, rip-roaring horror thriller creeped in like an assassin with a sniper rifle in the wilderness. And it was wrapped in a package that wasn't really a horror film at all, which may have been why most people brushed it off, but boy oh boy, when we put the words survival and horror together, they are the literal definition of this film. Written and directed by Julian and Will Gilby, A Lonely Place to Die sets out as just another survival movie, a group of people facing up against Mother Nature, but then very quickly a fly is added to that ointment and the game quickly becomes a very different kind of beast. It stars Melissa George as Alison, an experienced mountaineer and rock climber who, alongside her friends Ed, Rob, Jenny and Alex, takes on a hiking and climbing trip to the Scottish Highlands. Now, as I said previously, the first half of this film is very much a survival horror, and if we're being technical, all of the technical expertise lies in the first half for reasons that I won't try and spoil for you. You see, as the hiking group are making their way up the mountain, they find something in the wilderness that sets them on a completely new path. And then before you know it, this film is cooking with gas, and a very unexpected conflict rears its ugly head. I'll try not to say too much because the narrative to this film is actually very entertaining, in line with most classic early 2000s British thrillers, but it really does go the distance in terms of transitioning from one film to the other. Yeah, it might be a little bit messy in places, but the point of this film is that we trust in the protagonist. For the most part, they're not idiots, particularly Melissa George's character, and we're right there with her as she's sprinting through the thicket, cuts and bruises and psychological trauma and all. Also, more importantly, this film is so damn entertaining. Sometimes we just want to see people climb a mountain and then get chased back down it. Alright? Fine. Swinging in at number 4, Backcountry, 2014.
I didn't reach for that once. I wanted to bring it in case we needed it, which we do.
Can't get reception out here anyway.
Well, I would have loved to try.
Boy, this film is good. Really good, and it may perhaps be the most traditional of survival horrors on this list, but that's by the by because they're all terrifying in their own unique ways. This one though, this one has a little helping hand, or a claw. Listen, I love bears. I've got a bear tattooed on me, but they are immensely powerful wild animals, territorial creatures that will tear your face off and eat you given the chance. Bears are terrifyingly efficient animals, and well, that sounds like a pretty decent horror villain to me, right? And whilst that might come off as a little bit spoiler-ish, come on, you need only take one look at this film and realise it's going to feature some kind of nature. So yeah, consider yourselves pre-warned, I guess. Written and directed by Adam McDonald, the Canadian filmmaker that would go on to create 2017's Pewacket, Backcountry is loosely based on the true story of a man-eating bear attack in Missinaba Lake Provincial Park in Ontario back in 2005. The film itself tells the tale of Alex and Jen, a couple that decides to take a weekend camping trip out in the wilderness. Now, Alex figures himself as quite the capable outdoorsman, and Jen is admittedly an unabashed rookie. But the true choking fear of this film is how quickly things can go wrong in the wilderness if you approach Mother Nature with arrogance, much to the umbrage of Alex. Now, I won't say any more because this film is reliant on the unravelling of its plot to deliver the anxiety, but part of the true joy of this film is in its bare bones approach to filmmaking. For all intents and purposes, this film demonstrates the strengths that can be found in independent cinema. Put it this way, if Backcountry starred anyone of big name cinema, it wouldn't really have done the same job. That's not to say that the acting in this film isn't remarkable though, because it really is, and for a cast of essentially 4 people and a bear, you better hope the acting is good. Yeah, Backcountry, really good one, give it a watch. Next up at number 3, Eden Lake, 2008.
Is that new?
Yeah, do you like it?
I like the bottom.
Where do we even begin with Eden Lake? I'm not entirely sure. You see, whilst this film very much is the definition of survival horror, also the means in which that survival takes place is a whole different topic. As far as British horror cinema is concerned, 2008's Eden Lake has made some serious waves, although at the time it wasn't exactly heralded as a breakthrough piece of cinema, but nevertheless, because in hindsight it managed to define a very specific time and place, which is important, particularly when we're analysing the term survival in this sense. Also, it's also important to note, this film will make you very angry. You will not watch this film and find any sense of resolution. In many ways, it's British cinema's attempt at the new French extremity. It's hopeless, and for a survival film, that's a really bleak premise. Nevertheless, there are many things to be found in 2008's Eden Lake that define the parameters of what is needed to make us care about a character's survival. Just in this case, it might not be those that we expect. Written and directed by James Watkins, who would go on to direct 2012's The Woman in Black, Eden Lake tells the tale of a nursery school teacher, Jenny, played by Kelly Riley, and her boyfriend Steve, played by Michael Fassbender. Also, it's important to note that both Riley and Fassbender deliver some remarkable performances in this film, but the show is well and truly stolen by Jack O'Connell, one of my favourite British actors of all time, and who truly manages to steal the show here with absolutely electrifying performances throughout. O'Connell plays a teenager named Brett, the psychopathic leader of a gang of youngsters who torment Jenny and Steve during their weekend camping trip. And yeah, that's kind of all there is to it really, but start to finish, this film is a white knuckle ride that you can't help but watch. Like I said, this film will make you angry, it will make you scream at the screen, it will make you question why you're even watching it. But like I said, putting this on a survival list is kind of a double standard, but as far as making you feel something in terms of horror, this one is in a league of its own. Coming in at number 2, You're Next, 2011. Yeah, of course, although we may have lowered the tone a little bit with Eden Lake, we can bring up the full frontal horror joy with 2011's You're Next. And this film definitely wouldn't be a survival horror in the traditional sense, unless that is, if it wasn't for one character in particular. Erin, one of the most awesome final girls ever written, but hey, we'll stop there because no spoilers, right? On that note though, it's also probably appropriate to mention that this film is technically a home invasion movie, but hey, again, thanks to Erin, this film is very much a survival film. But again, no spoilers. Hey, whatever, you guys can probably guess by now what's going on with this film, but for those of you that haven't seen it, please give Your Next a watch because it's a necessary entry for any horror fan's catalogue, and if this one's flown you by like a straight arrow from a tree line, make sure you go catch it. Written by Simon Barrett and directed by Adam Wingard, Your Next tells the tale of Erin, played by Shani Vincent, and her boyfriend Crispin, who head out to a family reunion at his parents' vacation home in rural Missouri, along with his dysfunctional brothers and sisters and their partners, respectively. What stars as the stereotypical family comedy slash drama, and believe me, some of the dialogue in this film is laugh out loud hilarious, and Barrett holds impeccable detail to the tightness of the dialogue with some surprisingly fantastic performances from the supporting cast. It also serves to descend into total chaos as the film rolls onward, and trust me, once the trigger on this film has been pulled, there is no going back. Again, this film might make you question who's surviving who, but hey, it's fun nonetheless. Seriously, this film is so damn entertaining that the usual tropes of isolation and despair that comes with survival horror aren't at all found. They're not needed. In that regard, it sticks out like a sore thumb, but that's exactly why it deserves our praise. Give this one a watch. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Deliverance, 1972.
You done taken a wrong turn. See, the Cherry River don't go nowhere near Antry.
Ding 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 ding. Yeah, of course. Come on guys. Now for me, there is no greater survival horror movie than 1972's Deliverance. There just isn't. Nothing has yet been made to surpass the mastery of it. And do you know what's really weird? This film isn't ever really considered to be a survival horror movie. Yeah, that's a head scratcher because all I'd say is, what? Really? Have you seen it? This film is the definition of survival, and it's horrifying. And 75% of this film is some of the most perilous, tense, extreme situations of man versus nature versus man in the wild ever caught on camera. Deliverance is awesome, start to finish, and horror aside, it's a landmark piece of cinema that should be witnessed by any appreciator of the art form. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about one of the most messed up movies ever made. Written and directed by John Boorman, based upon the novel of the same name by James Dickey, Deliverance tells a tale of 4 men, Lewis, Ed, Bobby and Drew, who decide to head on down to Georgia on a canoe trip. Yeah, it's a simple setup, it's a simple delivery, with phenomenal execution. This film just couldn't have been made by today's standards, I'm sure of it. It was the last vestige of awe-inspiring on-location cinema that truly gives this film the scope it serves. Put it this way, halfway through the production of Deliverance, Deliverance, which was shot entirely on location, James Dickey, the author of the novel it was based on, came on set drunk out of his mind, and he started a fist fight with John Boorman because he was angry about a certain rewrite. Then they made up and they were good friends. Yeah, exactly. I almost don't want to say anything about this film's plot, particularly about a few key moments, but trust me on this one, if you haven't seen Deliverance, it's phenomenal. Also, I mean, just look at the cast. Ned Beatty, Jon Voight, Ronnie Cox, Burt Reynolds. My man Burt, the late great titan of cinema. Yeah, I needn't say any more. Deliverance is number one. That's all there is to it. Move on.
Kicking off the list at number 5, Buried. Starring Ryan Reynolds as the lead and only actor in the movie really, and directed by Rodrigo Cortés, the 2010 box film Buried left us breathless. After waking up in a pitch black wooden coffin buried underground somewhere during a job in Iraq, American truck driver Paul Conroy has to figure out where he is, why he's there, and how the hell he's getting out of this coffin alive. With just a lighter and a cell phone, with lousy reception. Ryan Reynolds is the only visible actor in the entire movie, and it was filmed in only 16 days. And right now you're probably thinking, cool, I don't want to watch it. That sounds boring. No, Ryan Reynolds himself suffers from claustrophobia in real life, and you can see it in the film, and it's amazing to watch. It's so fun. So Paul Conroy, which is Ryan Reynolds' character, quickly learns that he is being held for ransom for $5 million. Now, I've said enough, that's it. I'm not going to give you any more details about the plot because I truly believe this is one of the best hidden gems out there. As you watch Ryan Reynolds run out of oxygen in the movie, you yourself start to feel the same. It gives you so much anxiety. That's what makes Buried so great. Ryan Reynolds reacts how an average Joe would. He gets scared, he gets upset, he has these panic attacks. Like, he doesn't play the tough guy too much. This movie finds the fine line between, oh, that's what I would have done, and ooh, no way I could ever do that. It's great. If you haven't seen Buried, I'm sure you'll find something in there that you like. Plus, the ending is awesome, sparks a lot of conversation in a good way, so check it out. And before we move on to number 4, if you haven't done so already, please make sure to throw us a thumbs up after this video, because it helps us out here at the studio quite a bit. Bless your souls. Alright, now back to the spooky list. Number 4, I Am Legend. Released in 2007, written by Mark Protasevich and directed by Frank Lawrence, Will Smith stars in this dark apocalypse survival movie based off the 1954 Richard Matheson novel. It is set in an abandoned New York City. We see grass growing through middle of intersections, buildings are falling apart, everything's a mess, and then in comes this sick red Mustang. Lo and behold, we meet Will Smith's character, Robert Neville. Robert is a scientist and he's the only living human left in New York, and his hands are quite full. So while fighting off infected humans, who at this point are like these undead vampire-like scary creatures, this guy also has to try and come up with a cure to save humans using his own blood. He just happens to be the only person immune to this virus, hence why he's the lone survivor. But these creatures don't just mosey around and moan and attack whatever just happens to be in their way. No, these things are smart, they're hunters. They're super fast and they're very, very strong. So dying is still a very real possibility, even in a world where you're the only one left. The virus itself was man-made. It actually started out as the cure to cancer, which sounds just lovely. I, like many others, enjoyed this movie a lot. Will Smith is so good in this. He plays a guy who is in the middle of losing his mind, basically. Like, it's gone to a point in this world where he's laid out mannequins around New York in like these various locations to interact with. Because he's been trying to save humans for like 3 years now in this movie. 3 years alone? Guys, I was losing my mind 3 minutes into lockdown. This movie often cuts back to when the outbreak first started, which is neat, because you see Robert with his wife and his daughter, and it's interesting to see how the world got to this point, while at the same time trying to see Robert try and get out of it, you know? And if you haven't seen I Am Legend, just, remove the rock from which you live under, grab your family dog, get a blanket, get nice and cozy, and have a nice movie night. You'll love it. And number 3, The Shallows. Starring Blake Lively and directed by Jaime Calais-Serra, this 2016 shark thriller is about a medical student named Nancy Adams, played of course by Blake Lively, as she sets out to a secluded beach to hit some waves to help her get over a close death. Now, after she grabs her board and gets going, she's only a mere 200 meters away from shore when a great white shark sets its sights on Nancy. So terrified, she books it to the nearest rock, and that's kind of above water. It's not an island, it's just like a little boop. And she waits for Jaws' angry cousin to leave. She waits and waits and keeps waiting, and unfortunately this shark is just in no rush today. It has all the patience in the world and waits for Nancy to return to the water. This shark has been around the block a few times. It knows this rock is very petite and eventually its dinner will have to return to the shallows. This movie was written by Anthony Jaswinski and directed by Jaime Calais-Serra, who is the same director that did those Liam Neeson action flicks like The Commuter, Nonstop, Run All Night. So if you were a fan of the tension in those action movies, you're gonna like this shark horror tension as well. I liked it a lot more than I thought it would, to be honest. When I saw the trailer about a shark stalking somebody, I was like, okay, I wasn't quite sold, but my mind was quickly changed once I clicked play. It's very well executed, and if this is the last good shark movie, I'm okay with that. Number 2, The Descent. Directed by Neil Marshall, released in 2005, The Descent follows Sarah, played by Shauna McDonald, as she copes with the death of her late husband and daughter. A lot of these have to do with death, I think it's weird. So her and her close friends decide to grab some ropes and explore some caves to help her get over the traumatic experience. So once they get close to the entrance of the caves, her friends start to list off all these possible dangers of their expedition, which is just the perfect time to now bring this up. Great. Those side effects being dehydration, disorientation, claustrophobia, panic attacks, paranoia, and hallucinations. Like, awesome. Thanks for the reminder, Rebecca. We'll see you in there. And as if any of those side effects don't scare you enough, they end up getting trapped in the cave after the entrance collapses. And then soon they meet the Crawlers. The Crawlers are a group of scary humanoid-like creatures that are blind, but have evolved to live in complete darkness inside of these caves. And they can also crawl around the walls like they're Spider-Man, which is just neat. And obviously they're super gross looking. They're like dirty bars of soap that just came to light. They're like all wet and they slip around. On top of a great horror movie, the group of friends also have this secondary plot that evolves between them. There's a little bit of drama that unfolds when they go in. So even during the quiet moments when nothing scary is happening on screen, the plot is still moving and keeping you anxious the entire time. So many layers of goodness. All wrapped up in an hour and 45 minutes. We love that. And if you aren't a fan of how it ends, don't you worry. There's an alternate ending that some have actually preferred over the one that they went with. They're both so good, yet so different. Many have argued the alternate ending is more suitable, but I don't know. If you've seen them both, comment down below which one you think. Original or alternate. Don't spoil it, just say one of those two. Down there, let's go. I'm curious what the ratio is. And finally, number 1, we have The Mist. Starring Thomas Jane, Marcia Gay Harden, and everybody's favorite police captain, Andre Braugher, the film finds a group of civilians trapped in a grocery store as a crazy storm blows in and causes a touch of chaos. Now, getting locked inside of a grocery store may not sound too scary because, you know, Mr. Noodles and chocolate, but the storm leaves this thick mist that just lingers outside of the grocery store, so they're not really sure if they can leave. But here's the kicker. Here's when it starts to get into full gear. The mist is full of terrifying creatures. So what started off as a trip to grab some groceries is now the tale of survival against these mysterious alien-like creatures. The movie came out in 2007 and Frank Darabont wrote and directed this masterpiece. On top of what may be the best ending to a horror movie, the movie has a lot of tense scenes, of course. I mean, in movies like The Descent, we have this group who chooses to go into the cave and then they have to try and survive and escape. But these guys are just your average Joes. Like, they're just there because they need eggs, you know? So it's pretty easy to relate to the characters and how they react to all this action that's happening. And it's not just one monster either. They're like these giant spiders, they're like a pterodactyl type creature. It's just a hot mess. Stephen King himself even said that he was genuinely frightened by this adaptation of his novella. So if that doesn't sell you, I don't know what will.
Starting off at our number 5 spot, Kyle Richards. Many people now know Kyle Richards from The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. But before she was a reality TV star, a lot of people remember her as Lindsay from the hit movie Halloween. During the filming of this movie, Kyle was just 7 years old. Filming went fine and Kyle actually made really good friends with the iconic actress that is Jamie Lee Curtis. And they're still friends to this day. But okay, back to how this movie messed her up. Well, after attending the premiere of this movie, Kyle was so terrified that she had to go and sleep with her mom until she was 15 years old. She was scared that someone was constantly hiding under her bed or behind the curtains just waiting to get her. Now, I want to remind you, when Kyle saw this movie, she was 7. And this movie's rated R, so how that was even allowed, I'm not sure. I know that nowadays, even if kids act in a movie, they're unable to see it if they're too young and a parent doesn't give consent. You guys have to admit, Halloween is a pretty creepy movie, so to watch it at 7 years old, yeah, that's going to freak you out. And at number 4, Linda Blair, better known as Regan from The Exorcist. This is pretty much known as one of the best horror films of all time. And at the center of it all, you have little 13-year-old Linda. So you would think that having been so young, this movie must have messed up her mind. But surprisingly, it didn't. She says that at the time, she didn't really know what was going on, and she just looked at it as acting. However, she is on this list, so the movie must have affected her in some negative way, right? Well, it turns out everything was fine until The Exorcist release in 1973. That was when Linda found herself hit with all of these questions in interviews about possession, faith, and Catholicism. Questions in which she was in no way prepared to answer. In an interview later in life, she said, "To me, The Exorcist was a work of fiction. I didn't realize that it dealt with anything in reality. And so when the press kept asking me about all of the devil stuff, it just kept adding to the pressure I was under. And it was an awful thing to go through as a teenager." At number 3, Ashton Kutcher. The film Jobs was the first biopic about Apple Computer's founder Steve Jobs. In order to get in the mind frame for this role, Ashton spent hundreds of hours studying tapes of Jobs in an effort to accurately replicate his hunched walk and mannerisms. But that's not all. Ashton also thought it would be a good idea to go on a very strict fruit-only diet just like Jobs did himself. But this landed him in the hospital. Jobs was known to be a fruitarian and followed a strict diet of fruit, nuts, and seeds. About this experience, Ashton said, "The fruitarian diet can lead to severe issues. I went to the hospital like 2 days before we started shooting the movie. I was doubled over in pain, my pancreas levels were completely out of whack. It was really terrifying." Now, this is also frightening as Steve Jobs actually died from pancreatic cancer. Coming in at number 2, Shelley Duvall. Shelley played a character named Wendy Torrance in the frightening film The Shining. The director of the film, Stanley Kubrick, made set a living hell for Shelley and really mistreated her. Others on set could tell that something was wrong with Shelley, but Stanley would tell them not to sympathize with her as she needed to stay in that mental state for her role. You guys might not know this, but the film was actually shot in chronological sequence, so people were really able to watch her character unravel on screen. But what people didn't know was that she was also unraveling in her real life as well. When the film wrapped, Shelley said that during the filming between May to October, she was in really poor health due to the stress of this role being so high. She let it be known that Stanley pushed and prodded her further than she'd ever been pushed before. She also admitted to it being the most difficult role she's ever played. During shooting, she literally got so stressed out that clumps of her hair would fall out of her head. There was one scene in particular that set her over the edge, and that was this scene.
Give me the bat. Stop swinging the bat. Give me the bat.
The director had her redo the scene an insane 127 times. Unbelievable. This is a scene where the character is terrified and crying. Imagine being forced to do that 127 times over and over again. That would be exhausting and really mess with your head. Her co-star Jack Nicholson credited her part as the toughest job he'd ever seen. He said if roles were reversed, he didn't know if he'd be able to do it. And in at number 1, ADRIEN Brody. For this role in The Pianist, ADRIEN got really into his character of a man who lost everything by actually losing everything. He lost a ton of weight, sold his apartment, sold his car, got rid of his cell phone, and even broke up with his long-term girlfriend. He did this because he felt this was the only way to really inhabit a man who had lost everything, was to strip his own life down to absolute basics. And so that's what he did. He took 2 bags and his keyboard and moved to Europe. Also, the character he played was forced to scavenge for food, so ADRIEN went on a crash diet to lose weight fast. He ended up losing a total of 30 pounds in just 6 weeks. At his lightest, he was 130 pounds, which for a man standing at 6 feet 5 inches tall is dangerously underweight. About this, he said, "There's an emptiness that comes with really starving, and I haven't experienced that. I couldn't have acted that without knowing it. I've experienced loss, I've experienced sadness in my life, but I didn't know the depression that comes with hunger." And on top of sacrificing everything and everyone in his personal life and starving himself, he was also practicing the piano for 4 hours a day. Until he could do a spot-on impression of Chopin. In an interview years later, ADRIEN said he was depressed for a year after the movie wrapped. He said he was very disturbed by what he embraced in the making of the film, and of the awareness that it opened him up to. But ADRIEN's commitment to the movie role paid off, as he then became the youngest person ever to win the Oscar for Best Actor in 2002 at the young age of 29.